thank God, first of all, for your moderator, Dr. Johnson, and to President Coulter. I thank you for the opportunity to share to all the pastors, to the ministry, auxiliary leaders, and to all of you for coming in on this workshop today. I'm honored to be able to share with you. I believe our time frame is 1 hour total. So that's about 45 minutes of information, and then we want to leave time for questions. You can also utilize the chat if something comes up while we're talking, presenting. I like to say this every time I do the workshop, that a lot of what I teach applies to myself. So every church is different. So please, if I said something, I don't want anybody to go back and say, well, Pastor Shelton said this is what we got to do at our church. This is just general information. You know, every church is different. But I want to begin even before, let me see, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share my screen. Alrighty. Can everyone see? All right. Yeah, so this changes the way we do church. Pastor, Holy Trinity Baptist Church in Amityville, New York. I've been here in New York for 10 years. I'm originally from Baltimore, so you may hear it in some of the words. You may hear it in my tone. You may say, yeah, he's from Baltimore, the way I talk. But also, these are all the books that I've written, picking up the pieces, changing the way we do church. Ain't no hurt like church hurt. Don't let Jezebel destroy your church. The latest book I just released, one of the latest books is I'm Saved, but I Still Need Deliverance. This book was inspired by Pastor Sean Jones. Also, I Need a Word. This is a book of preachers, and two of the Central Hustle preachers, Dr. Bottoms and Reverend Sean Jones, are part of that. You can get those books all on Amazon, but if you want bulk orders, you can contact me directly, and I can make sure you get all that information. But the Lord does this, allow me to just to write, and most of the writing that I do is for churches. It's practical information, easy to read. But as we talk about changing the way we do church, I'm going to try to condense this in this 45 minutes. But what we're doing right now with this session is literally changing the way we do church. Listen, there's a story, a familiar story in Mark chapter 2 about these four men who picked up a brother on the mat, and they was taking him to Jesus. They wanted to take him to Jesus, but when they got there, they had some mean ushers at the door, said nobody else could get in. And because they wouldn't let anybody in, instead of giving up on this brother, they decided to do something different. And that's literally what Central Hudson is doing now, and what many of our churches had to do. Our goal is still the same: get people to Jesus, get people closer or connected to Jesus, but our method have changed. And this is literally, COVID-19 has forced many of our churches to change our methods. But let me just talk about change just for a second. Just in case, change is not a bad word. Change is not a bad word. I know a lot of times they don't like to talk about it, or people don't want to hear about it in church, but change is not a bad word. And change has never been the problem. Change is natural. We change all the time, but people resisting change is the problem, in my opinion. Some people, these are a couple of reasons. Some people resist change because, one, people resist it because they don't see the benefit in change. And I'm talking about especially in church. We change at home. We went from the floor models, we went to the flat screens. So people change all the time, but it's something about when you change in church that causes some type of tension. Maybe because they don't see the benefit in change, or they don't see the need to change. But also when you're changing, you receive resistance because it requires some people to do more work in order to change effectively. In this season where we had to go virtual, it's requiring a whole lot more work, and not everybody wants to do the work. But also some people fight change because they lose control. Listen, I had a problem here. I tried to change some presidents. I had some presidents that's been in office for a long time, and I tried to make a change. Well, I did make a change, but it caused some friction because some people, for whatever reason, in their mind, think they're supposed to die in office. So when you start changing, you'll face some resistance because some people lose control, but also it requires you to come out of your comfort zone and not everyone wants to come out of their comfort zone. Change causes people to come out of their comfort zone. So when implementing change, if you're going to change the way you do church in any aspect, I believe we have to help people see the benefit of change. If you're going to face less resistance, if you're going to successfully implement change, whether it's in your church, whether it's in your ministry, or even in your life, one way that can ease some resistance is to help people see the benefit of change. The first says, change creates opportunities for personal and spiritual growth. This is why I believe that our churches should always be incorporating some type of change, because it creates opportunities for personal and spiritual growth. Number two, it prevents things from becoming stagnant and unfruitful. In John 15, anything that's come unfruitful is cut off. Sometimes you can do it for so long or the same way. If our service stay the same and there's no change, there's people know when to come in. They know, matter of fact, even now in this virtual season, if everything stay the same, they know when to click on, because that's when you're going to preach. They understand. So change creates opportunities, and it keeps us from being stagnant and unfruitful. It ensures also that a bad situation do not last forever. Change can benefit us because it can ensure that a bad thing does not operate forever, but it also requires faith. When we're changing the way we do church, when we are changing, also it requires us to operate in faith, because sometimes change, like I said earlier, brings us out of our comfort zone. We don't know what God is going to do. And in this season, change, listen, is requiring us to operate in a place where we're not necessarily comfortable. If somebody asks you, when are we going back to church, or when is this going to be over? I have no answers, no clue. But we're operating in faith, trusting that God will get us through. But also, change can breathe life into a dead situation. Change can help us, right? I'm moving because I want to get to this part where I want to connect these dots of COVID. Things to remember when you're implementing change. We have to remember that everyone may not be open to the change. You can have a great idea, you can have a great vision, and it can benefit everybody. But we must understand that every person may not be open to the change. However, just because everyone is not open to the change does not mean that we should not implement the change. Sometimes we got to help people understand. Some people, they may have different reasons why they're not open to whatever change you're implementing in the church. Last year, I implemented online giving. Last year, I implemented, we had quick comments, I had the website, and there was a lot of people who said, we don't need that because we always gave by envelopes and it's always worked for us. Last year, we started Facebook Live our services. A lot of people, we don't need cameras and technology in the church. But because I understood the benefit, I kept it. And now some of them I'm going to skip that. Listen, just because people don't agree with it, I forgot y'all said this recorded. Listen, just because people don't agree with the change, you got to understand, especially if you're in leadership, we got to do what's best for the church, and we've got to follow God. And some people may not understand it in the beginning, but when they see the benefits, they may shift. Secondly, understand change does not happen overnight. No, you can't turn the Titanic, especially if they've been doing it for years. It's something that's been going on for years. It's going to take time. One of the things that I used to do, when I came to New York, I had to do some changes in our service. Our ushers, we used to start the service, do the call to worship, and then the choir used to process in. We started the service, we did praise and worship, then we had to stop the service for the choir to march in. And this is what they've been doing for years. So when I suggested it, it was like, no. So I was strategic. Every summer, our services were different. So I implemented every change that I wanted in our order of worship. I did it over the summer because sometimes people will receive it when they see it first. So, and I understood it just takes time. change got to be strategic. And I've also learned that when I first came to Holy Trinity, I wasn't the only pastor. No, there were some little pastors in the pews and pastors all over. So I had to learn how when you're implementing vision, when you're implementing change, I had to get my leaders and influential members on board. This is what Nehemiah did. You got to sow your vision. You create vision, let people buy in and be a part of it. Some people will support change if they feel a part of the change. So I got the leaders involved, got those influential members involved, and then we begin to plant that seed to the congregation. One of the things I did when I came to Holy Trinity is we had panel all around the church. It was that dark brown panel all around the church, and I wanted to put white sheetrock because I thought that white would make the church look better. But I had to understand I couldn't just go because there was some people's grandma's panel. Grandma, that church has always had this panel. And you don't go in somebody's church just tearing off stuff. But I had to teach them that I'm not changing. We just making our church look better. But it took time. And I understood that. Timing is everything. Now, this is what I really want to get to. It's a great time, in my opinion, to make some necessary changes. Now, listen, is probably one of the greatest times to make some necessary changes in our churches, in our ministries. That now is probably one of the greatest times. Yo, and that's what I'm talking about, how COVID-19 changed the way we do church. We wasn't ready for this. I was planning my 10th pastoral anniversary. I had a banquet planned. We had some celebrations planned. We were getting ready for a big year. And then came COVID-19. We were not ready for this. And this is what happened to us. Look, COVID came and changed the way we drastically. But I looked at it different. I've learned how to look at opposition or burdens as opportunities. Some people don't agree with this, but I'm saying that COVID-19 did us a favor. I'm suggesting that this, as it relates to changing the way we do church, this pandemic, outside of the devastation and the deaths, that's a hard reality. But when you look at some of our churches, this was a blessing in disguise. One, here it is. It forced us to be the church instead of just having church. Yo, we were having some good church. We would show up every Sunday. We would do praise and worship. We would pray, read scripture. We would plan our program, spend a long time with our announcements, introduce all the colors and what we're going to wear and who's the president and all those things. We were having some good church. We would shout. We would go home and come back the next week and do it all over again. We were having church. But this pandemic stripped a lot of that away from us. And then it forced us to be the church, because now we some of us, we didn't have access to our buildings. We couldn't do the anniversaries, couldn't do the programs, couldn't dress up. We ain't had time to worry about what somebody had on. We ain't worry about who's sitting next to who. Worry about why they keep singing the same song and who's dancing, who's shouting. We couldn't worry about any of that. It forced us now, when this pandemic hit, we had to pray, we had to seek God, member care, call for each other. In a sense, so it stripped all of that other stuff. And it forced us out the building where we started churches that wasn't feeding, started feeding. I mean, there was a time when you couldn't get more than 10 people, if that, on the prayer call. Now the prayer call was overloaded. You know, and then ministry is serving. Now for me, I don't know. I have more people given during the pandemic that wasn't given prior. It did us a favor in a sense. When you look at it, it caused us to be the church. Now, some of the things that we thought was important no longer as important, but also this pandemic made us get our priorities in order. That we're in a season where we're just trying to get closer to God. In a season where now the focus is about Christian education. More people may be attending Bible study online. We're getting back to those basics: prayer, praise, member care, word. We're not worried about a lot of the things that we were worried about. This pandemic, all that, we couldn't do any of that. It forced us to get our priorities in order, but also it transformed some Pharisees into disciples. Lord have mercy. Yes, you know, the religious sect that all they were worried about was what you had on. In our churches, worrying about what you where you were sitting, and worrying about keeping the tradition of the church. But when all of that, this pandemic came, it caused us to be disciples, looking out for each other, following Christ and not following programs. Let me, I don't know about any other pastor, but Pastor Culture, I haven't had anybody fight over being the president in this season. I haven't had one fight over what color we gonna wear in this season. Nobody was fighting over who gonna lead a song, because we haven't had sing. Listen, yo, we the religious stuff. I've had nobody complain about somebody wearing something too short, because most of y'all probably had on pajamas anyway. Anyway, the focus has been on Christ. This pandemic has helped us change our focus back to what really matters. And what matters? Prayer. We've been praying. We've been interceding. We've been looking out for the less fortunate. When Jesus came, Jesus treated people's needs as holy. So we're in a season where this season, this COVID has done us a favor to cause us to focus on what really matters. But it exposed our true commitment. Because in reality, there are some people, since this pandemic hit, and since we have not been able to go back to our buildings, some people have fallen off. We haven't heard from them, haven't seen them, haven't given, which means they were committed to the church building and not to Christ. Because if we're committed to Christ, we're still involved. Because we understand that our commitment was not to the builders, our commitment was to Christ and the church family. So whether I got to participate from home or I got to drive to the church, I'm all in. And this has separated those who were committed to the church, because if some people really, their commitment is going to the church, well, I can't get involved, I can't go to the building. No, if you're committed to whatever. You understand we're in a pandemic. So whether my church is having Zoom parties, whether my church is having Zoom worship on Zoom, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, whatever the case, I'm all in, and I can still learn from Christ. And also, watch this. The same way I worshiped in the church, I can worship at home. Because if your praise and your shout was limited to a building, then matter of fact, we got to wonder, was it authentic, or did you just want an audience? All right, so here it is. It forced us. I'm talking about change what we do church. This pandemic, and I'm speaking definitely for me, forced us to catch up to the world as it relates to technology and virtual church. It's been going on for years. Y'all, this is not nothing new. I just believe for many churches, we were behind because we did not see technology as a priority. And let me speak. Let me tell you from my heart. Last year I wrestled because I was getting ready to stop streaming. I was getting ready to stop showing our services because I was getting mad because a lot of folk were staying home, watching it, commenting, and I'm trying to figure out why you not at church. I thought that you supposed to be at church. But here it is, and I was getting upset. I said, well, if they're not going to come to church, because my in-service attendance was declining. But I noticed that a lot of people were watching online for whatever reason. So I was almost at a place where I was getting ready to eliminate our virtual church. But then COVID hit and showed that we need, but it changed my perception of virtual church, and I understood, and now I'm scrambling. All I had was a phone, and I didn't realize how much it takes to do virtual church, to get the technology. So for weeks, we're scrambling, and now we're understanding that church, we got to look at church differently if we're going to succeed in this season, because we can't just look at those who come in the building. We also have to look at those who are connected through online services. Because the truth of the matter is, unfortunately, and it's just my opinion, when we go back, everybody will not come back immediately. There's still going to be a great contingent of people who stay home and watch it virtually. So which means is that not only do we have to invest in our buildings, I believe we should also invest in our streams, because if you were on yesterday, if somebody looked on your stream, I had a problem Sunday. My stream kept freezing, and it kept freezing. And I noticed our numbers kept dropping because, no, they're going to go to the next one. But I understood. But then some people shifted to our conference call. But we have to understand that because this pandemic is still real, that we have to understand that we have physical membership, but I also believe we have to have virtual membership, and that's changing. Because for me, virtual church or streaming was somewhat of an afterthought. It was something we did just in case. But now, I'm not saying to take the place. I don't believe there's anything that can compare with that in-person worship experience. But I do understand that some people will not come back, and we can still connect with them. Now, I for the first time, I can care less if it's snow. Because if it's snow, I'm still going to have church. You snow all at once, 2 feet. Snow all at once. I've learned how to, I've learned how I can have church. This pandemic has helped us. So COVID-19 forced us to change. Let me tell you, because there's some who said, we don't need cameras. We don't need all that technology in the church. Matter of fact, them young people should be walking around here with them phones. So we went from before COVID-19 to during COVID. The church is empty. Now, the way we can keep people connected is we've got to also understand, now this is just temporary because we want people to come back to the building. But in order for people to come back to the building, we're going to have to change some stuff. Here's some of the things we got to change. We're going to have to change some of our attitudes. Because, listen, because if nobody's going to keep coming to a building where they're going to be judged, nobody's going to keep coming to a building where they're going to be mistreated, where they look like they don't belong. So if the church is not full of love, our church is going to look empty like the picture, this one on the right. Our church is going to continue to look like this. Because people say now they have an option. Well, they always had an option rather than going to another church. If I got to deal with a whole lot of stuff, I'll just watch it online. This pandemic, so it's changed us. So questions to consider moving forward. I'm trying to stick to the time. These are some questions that I believe every church, every pastor, every leader, all of us, that we got to wrestle with as we consider moving forward. How do we keep believers connected and committed when they are away from the church building? See, you notice that a lot of our ministries were set up to minister to people who came to the building, to minister to people who came to Bible study and Sunday school. But now, as we're changing, we've got to consider that we have another audience, that we have those who may not come to the building. And do we not minister to them because they don't come for whatever reason? Some people won't be comfortable. Now, when members move down south, if they still love and they want to be connected to their church, virtual church give them the opportunity to stay connected. When our young people go off to college and they say, well, I don't have a church in my area, they still can tune in and still be connected. Not just Sunday morning service. Now, with Zoom and WebEx and all these other, we still can communicate. We can do new members class. We can counsel. We can do ministry beyond the building. So we've got to figure out how we can keep those believers connected. Unfortunately, this is the first season that I know of where our evangelism strategy has to change, because not only are we evangelizing non-believers, we're going to have to evangelize believers to come back. This is a season where we're going to have to go and try to get believers to move out of their comfortable couch and come back to corporate worship. Our strategies have to change, where we can't just focus about those who come. We've got to connect those who are not coming to the building. And then we also got to wrestle with this. What practices should we keep? What should we discontinue? Because I'm wrestling, trying to figure out, when we go back, what should we keep? Because I've learned that it don't take all day to have a good quality worship service in this season. It don't take all day to minister to the people. And well, I realized this, and I kind of evaluate our stream. Our numbers go up right when I start preaching. So it seems as if most people are coming on virtual church for the word. So I'm not going to treat you like they do when you go to the hibachi grill. When I go to the hibachi, I order. They say, "What do you want?" I tell them I want shrimp and I want steak. And when I go to the hibachi, I say I want shrimp and steak. And y'all know what they do at the hibachi? They give you some noodles, they give you some rice, they give you all these vegetables. They fill you up on all that stuff. And by the time you get the shrimp and steak, you got to take it home. So, matter of fact, give me the shrimp and steak first, because that's really what I want. That's what I'm paying for. So don't give me so much fluff or bread that I don't have room for no meat. So that's one of the things we're going to have to consider, that even now, when we go back, and even now, let's not give so much bread that they don't have enough room to, because we really want you to get the meat, because the meat is what's going to help you in the long run. So I understand that some things I'm going to have to cut out, especially when we go back. When we go back, it's going to literally be the same flow as it was now, just maybe a tiny bit longer, because it's going to have to be a slow adjustment. So our worship service has been condensed. And also, like when you talk about going back, going back, transitioning, it's going to have to be succinct, because one, we don't want to have people in the building too long, because we're trying to limit the use of bathrooms for emergency. So I don't want to keep you in there long, right? What practices should we keep? These are things we got to think about. What practices should we discontinue? If not forever, but just for maybe a small season, and you transition to what God is showing you. How do we minister to those who will not come back to the building? And I always say the virtual church should definitely continue. This is just my opinion. I believe, because most churches in this season have reached more people probably than we've reached before. Some people have been connected. And also now we're providing ministry for those who are sick, shut in, those who are working. That's changing the way we do church, all right? But also, how will we fellowship with other churches, or is that a thing of the past? See, downstate in New York City and Long Island, I'm not sure of the situation, they love the afternoon service. Hey, listen, I came from Baltimore. We didn't really do afternoon services, but down here, they love, every week there's an afternoon service. You know what? And I don't know if they just love the word that much, or they just love going to get some more chicken. Listen, afternoon service, churches come, we feed them, we fellowship. But because of safety issues, and we don't want to have church traveling and not feed you, I know for me, we're not doing any afternoon services this year. No, because, so we got to realize, and then if you have it, are people going to feel comfortable? Because when you get back, your members know your flow. They know what you have in place, but you can't always guarantee that others will. So that's something we got to consider, and that would be a change. Also, what ministries will we need to add or enhance in order to be effective in this season and thereafter? So one of the ministries I know that we need now and definitely after is we're going to have a real legitimate mental health ministry, because many of us are grieving in this season. Many of us is going to have some some post-traumatic stress in the next season. And listen, that's a real ministry. If we're going to minister to the whole person, not only are we taking care of their physical needs, churches should also take care of their mental needs. This is a ministry. But listen, everybody not equipped to do it. We got to have some people who know. Listen, because I need more than the Bible. I need to go sit on the couch and tell them, I'm crazy right now. I'm losing it. Let it alone. But a ministry. But also, we're going to have to really probably enhance our bereavement or bereavement ministry if we don't have one. Can you imagine what people have suffered? We've lost loved ones and could not bury them the way we couldn't send them home. Part of our culture is sending our loved ones home the right way. That brings closure. But many people have not. And our churches, if we can, may want to provide some help with some bereavement. That's changing, right? Moving forward. But I got to caution you. Re-entry will not be easy. It's not just a matter of picking a date where we're going to run back and go to the church. No. The mindset has to change before we come in. My recommendation, you must have a proficient plan prior to re-entering the building. And this plan, I have a plan. We have a team. This plan is in the works. I'm going to make sure leaders involved. Some of the things you got to start from the parking lot. That when people come, making sure people park correctly with distance. And listen, try not to fellowship like we do. We go see and speak. Hey, no, we still in the pandemic. When you come in, and also when you go into church, all those beautiful pictures of Jesus and President Obama. You may not see those, but you will see some masks must be worn. You will see some 6 feet social distancing. Matter of fact, you will see some stop at the door. When you come in the door, before you can get in, we need to check your temperature. But also, we got to get some information because we still got to do some contact tracing. We gotta keep people information, letting you know that we need to know who was in the building, what day, because if a breakout, we got to be able to trace it back to who was in the building on a certain day. And see, it's not just, let me just walk in and get my praise on. It's a process that we're going to have in order to get back into our buildings in the safety. So which means, change the way we do church, that we've got to come earlier than before. Because there's a process we've got to go through. So the mindset has to change. We got to come in. And then also, so for me, I'm not going in this season, I'm not going to have ushers. I'm going to have a seating team. Because now there's no more, when we go back, there's not going to be any more favorite seats. Because now we're going to have to sit people according to the social distancing guidelines and whether or not they're individual or family. And we can't block off the special seats for titles. We gotta secure, make sure those who come sit a certain way. Then we're gonna have our offering gonna change. The ushers won't be marching. There'll be no more passing of the baskets. There's none of those things. The choirs in our context in my church, the choirs won't be singing because of the aerosols. It's going to be a whole lot that we got to consider, which means all of this have to be in place and church will be different. And we've got to be able to grasp that. And if church is going to thrive and survive, everyone must embrace this new normal, as we call it, which means that we shouldn't have to tell you that you got to wear a mask. You should know it because the mask is helping each other, that we love each other enough, care for each other, that not only do we got to look out for ourselves, we got to look out for others. So we're inside of a church praising God, and I can't even see your expression. No hugging. We hug by nature. We talk about changing the way we do church. I love you, and I'm so happy to see you, but we're still in the pandemic. That's those things we got to do. But also changing. We got to do, listen, y'all, worship and teaching will not be the same. For some, we've got to, like we're doing now, y'all I appreciate this platform. You're above the curve, understanding that a lot of the teaching is going to have to be by Zoom. So for us, whenever we go back, if we go back this year, the only thing we'll do is Sunday morning service. There'll be everything, every meeting, every class will continue to be virtual, at least for the rest of this year. We don't know. That's changing, and that's different for some people. It's going to be hard for us. But here's the thing: we can't be like the children of Israel and try to go back to Egypt when things get tough. It it was a little easier to close. It's hard to get back in the building because going back, we got to make sure. The worst thing any pastor wants is to rush back and people get sick and have to close all over again because they love the church, but their family members don't. And we don't want to be the cause of somebody coming to our churches, getting sick because we rushed and didn't put the procedures in place. And God forbid they pass. We can't live with that. So we got to make sure. So if your pastor is being patient, pray for them. Understand. And here's another thing. Don't watch what other churches are doing and try to make that happen for your church. Your church has to be your church. Every church is different. And what somebody else is doing is different. And check this out. And just because somebody else go back before you do doesn't make one wrong and one right. Let's just focus on our own church and let's do what's best for our church. But don't be like the children of Israel. You know, every time something happened they didn't like, they got upset with Moses. When you read Numbers chapter 20, they said, Moses, we don't have no water. They were upset. And then they, listen, I was upset. Moses, we don't have no water. And Moses lost it. Moses went to God and said, Lord, these your people. I'm tired of it. God said, no, they're your people. Moses, I can't take it. So he called Moses in. Moses prayed. And Moses, God said, Moses, go back out, speak to the rock, and the water going to come out. But because Moses was frustrated, Moses went out and he saw him, and Moses struck the rock. And y'all, check this out. Moses got in trouble. The people got their water, and Moses missed the promised land. Lord have mercy. Don't be like that. It's going to be rough, but let's not go back to Egypt. God brought us out of Egypt. We're in the wilderness right now, but if we can stay together, if we can follow God, we'll get you the promised land, which means don't try to create what was. Now is the time to embrace new possibilities. Let's not think about, well, when we go back, what we're going to do. Let's think about what can be done moving forward. That's when we talk about changing the way we do church. We're creating new possibilities. God has purged some stuff, giving us a new opportunity. This is probably one of the first times in history that I know of that God has given us the ability for a fresh start. Embrace it. And also, this is my recommendation. We must redefine membership. This is what I mean. Redefine membership. Probably in most of our bylaws and constitution, membership is clearly defined. You know, you accept Christ, you come, and here it is. If you miss 3 communions or something, you're inactive or you're not a good member. But also now, moving forward, we may have to implement something that defines virtual membership, because people will attend Sundays, give, and may not ever step in the building necessarily, but just because they haven't attended 3 communions, does that make them an inactive member? So when we talk about in our bylaws and constitution or our operations manual, we really have to think and consider, especially moving forward, virtual membership. Now, that's up to each church and each pastor, but that's what I'm going to do, because it says in it, if you don't come 3 straight communions, then you're an inactive member. But let's talk about if you don't come to the building. But our virtual members will be attentively, basically every week. They're giving, they're participating in the Bible study, the Sunday school, but they're not physically coming to the building, and they still should have all rights and privileges. Now, this is the one, and I put it in yellow intentionally. This is something, when I talk about embracing this new, going back, as we go back in this season, every member must be able to handle the pastor not being as personable. Which here's why. As pastors, we love to hug and touch our members, but in this season of social distancing, we can't be as personal. I'm not talking about calling and checking on you, but sometimes people get mad. Well, the pastor ain't come over and speak to me today. The pastor ain't shake my hand. The pastor didn't come see me in the hospital. Yo, unfortunately, I had a member who lost a brother, and I couldn't go. I usually go and it hurt, but we need our members to understand that we've got to pastor and provide pastoral care in a different way. And until we get through this, we have to deal with a phone call or virtual, because not only do we have to protect ourselves, we also got to protect pastors, each other, because nobody is exempt from catching this virus. In some churches, that's hard because I'm used to just my pastor coming every time I'm sick or that personal touch. For a season, we're going to have to be comfortable with a wave and a, right? Let's change we do church. All right, so there are no experts. We're trying to figure it out as we go. In order to be successful, we must be prayerful over every decision, because we don't know. Listen, this is we're canoeing. This is a book called Canoeing the Mountains. This is some uncharted territory. We're driving without a road map. We're in the middle of the ocean, and we feel like we're going in the right direction, but we still don't see land. But we're doing everything we can to stay afloat. And we need the prayers. We need members not just praying that God will give us direction as a church, but also keep us together. Lord, keep us together. But also we got to be proficient in our planning. And in this season, the church must be people-driven, not program-driven. Here's what I mean. That in this season, we've got to consider the safety, the mental and physical health of the people over the programs. Just because it's church anniversary, just because it's Women's or Men's Day, listen, if we can't, especially if you're not at church, if it can't be done virtually, we may have to listen. I had Resurrection Sunday at home with my wife and my son. I still put on my white, but it wasn't the same. This was the first year I cried because I did not preach a Good Friday service. But I understood that I have to be people-driven. I have to understand the safety of the people. But for the program, we got to be progressive. We got to push through this season. And we need all hands on deck in order to get through this season. Let's go and change the way we do church. And I believe, y'all, together, we can turn our obstacles into new opportunities. But it's going to take a change and mindset. Thing is going to be different, but we can handle different as long as we're handling it together. Amen. Questions? Any questions?
Dr. Sheldon, I don't have a question. I just have a comment. First of all, thank you so much for teaching. You always give such creative, helpful instruction. And I truly appreciate the part about the comparison with the children of Israel, wanting to go back. Difficult. And certainly as we navigate through this, there will be difficult days. So I just thank you so much for your insight and for your instruction. It's very, very helpful to me. So thank you.
And can I add something to that? So when times get difficult, we need Joshua's and Caleb's.
Okay. Yes, sir.
That because listen, when you Numbers chapter 13, you remember it was 12 spies, 10 went against Moses and 2 stood for him. But the problem I have with that is in chapter 11, he just gave him 70 elders with his spirit to help him out. It was 70. So when you get in chapter 11, 70 elders were ordained and given titles. But when you get to chapter 13, the 70 was nowhere to be found. So which means in this season, we don't need silent leaders. We need leaders who are going to stand with their leader, their pastor, and help them get through this season. And once this, we need leaders who can follow directions, because the only direction was go see the land. I ain't asked y'all to come. I ain't asked for no vote. I ain't asked for no opinion. We need Joshua and Caleb's in this season because, y'all, this is a tough season. They ain't never been to the promised land, and we ain't never been in the pandemic. Any questions, or comments?
If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves. You have the ability to unmute yourselves.
Dr. Shelton, this is Reverend Coulter. First of all, I just want to thank you on behalf of Central Hudson. You have truly blessed us, and you always bless us by your presence and just by your wisdom and your anointing that God has put upon your life. there's some things that you really have challenged me about. One of the things is getting the church to understand creating new possibilities. That word for me is huge because the word possibilities has literally changed my life. Coming from, the streets of the Bronx, born and raised in the South Bronx in a really stressful area, I thank God that he showed me possibilities. And so what you did was you challenged me as a pastor to go back to my church to show the people possibilities. And so I want to thank you for that, because that really resonated with me, because we have an opportunity here to really do something really great. And if we don't seize that moment, we may miss it. And so I'm really grateful right now. As I'm talking to you, my heart is happy because I have my right hand on Zoom with me, which is the chair of my deacon board, because he's right here with me so we can see this together as leaders, and we can go back to our church and we can get them to see that we can really seize this moment and do some really great things. So I just want to thank you for all of the, I have so many things written down, but I just want to thank you for that, because that has really opened my mind.
Yeah. I use the word new normal, but really it's just new opportunities, really,
Yes, it is.
We're all going to go, I use it because it's a tagline that's being used, but really it's just a new opportunity, new possibilities, like you said. And the mistake that I made a few years ago is I was trying to take our church back to, and I say it in a way, where God was, instead of trying to move them to where God is, where God has shifted us to, and I was fighting and struggling because I was trying to take us back when God was trying to take us forward.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's easier to go with the wind than it is to go against it.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Bless you, man.
Pastor Sheldon.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Pastor Collier talked about a possibility, but for me, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to be used by God. It's an opportunity to be useful to our congregation and to my pastor. There's a couple of people that are on the line that I see now that know me. I came from New York, and I'm living right now in North Carolina, but it's still an opportunity. It's still something for me to do. And it doesn't matter how old I am or young I am or whatever, what's in me is still in me. And it's allowing me to be able to use what God gave me to be able to use it at this time, during this pandemic, after this pandemic, still relying on God. I appreciate this class. I really do.
Absolutely. Thank you. And a pandemic should never stop us from being productive at all. It just means we got to be more creative. I've become a tech person. Because of our dynamics, and it was just me and my family. I taught my son how to operate software and how to become more technology sound. So it forced me to work Zoom. Forced me to be able to record and put scriptures on the screen. But I wanted to be like Paul, that even though I was locked down, I'm gonna still produce. That what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel, and that's how I look at it. And it's this change in our mindset, and we all got an opportunity to come through this stronger than we've ever been. I won't be able to preach as good as Dr. Bottoms, but at least I can work on some sermons. Any other questions? I'm sorry. Any questions, comments? We got like 5-7 minutes. Any other questions, comments? Anybody?
One thing I wanted to mention to you, Dr. Shelton, is this. There were a few people in the chat that were requesting a copy of your presentation. I know you said earlier that you had sent it to Dean Streeter McCray. I don't know.
So you give me an email, or if there's one email I could send and somebody can forward. Do we have a?
What I could do is I can give you my email,
And I'll send it to you.
And then everyone who wants a copy, if you put your email in the chat room, I will make sure that you get a copy, or I'll pass it on to Pastor Coulter to make sure it goes through the proper channels, but I will facilitate that.
Oh yeah, so yeah, you put it in chat and I'll send it to you directly. Absolutely.
All righty, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Anybody?
Yes, Dr. Shelton.
Yes, sir.
This is Deacon Smith. I'm president of the Working Church of the Westchester County and vicinity. And the majority of our members are seniors in many instances. And of course, the priorities of the church, as far as I'm concerned, has not changed, but there is only one priority, and that's the commission of the church. But dealing with senior members, sometimes they are not willing to make these changes that we are talking about. I find that they are necessary because things around us is changing, so we must change. And but the commission never changes, and the programs should always be initiated, or Christ should always be ahead of those programs. And we try to keep that in place through prayer and vision, and asking God and the Holy Spirit to lead us in that way. But what really matters is the commission. And I just like to put my emphasis on that,
So thank you so much. One of the things I had to do is, this shift I had to remember our seniors. So in this season, what I did was I did a 4-week for the whole month of June. I did a class on technology for 4 weeks. Every Monday, the first Monday, I got them to call on the conference call. And I went step by step. We created an email. Then I walked them step by step how to create a Zoom account. Then through Zoom, I taught them everything they need to know about Facebook, all email. We walked through technology because I wanted them to be connected if they desired to. We already had the conference call, but I spent time every Monday and we walked step by step. And I also, that way they could write it down. That way if they wanted to get on a Zoom conference call like this, if they wanted to go on Facebook, whatever they wanted to do, we tried to implement, because I didn't want them to feel left out. Also, in this season, on Saturdays, I created a senior-only Bible study. They call and they just for them, because I didn't want anyone to feel left out. And I think, if I can strengthen one area, is our young people who may suffer the most. So whatever, all of us have different demographics. As in this season, as we're changing, we got to be intentional about reaching those and providing ministry where they're comfortable, but also trying to get them to come out of their comfort zone to help out. So my church had a lot that needed some help with technology, so I volunteered to go through those things and teach them and do what we can. But I wanted to make sure, every need is different, but as we're changing, we want to help equip people to adapt to the change.